Croeso, Difda, Bernachtin, Gia Hwitch, Fulcher, Daymat. Welcome to the Celtic Myths and Legends podcast. I am your humble host, Sian Esther Powell, and I'm going to be taking you on a journey through all the myths and legends of the 6 Celtic nations. That's Wales, Cornwall, Brittany, Isle of Man, Scotland and Ireland. Welcome. Hello everyone, we are back to Isle of Man. I'm quite impressed with that. That was not a lot of preamble like I usually do. I've just gone straight into it. Right, Isle of Man, let's go. Except let's not go, because let's fill you in a little bit. I feel like right now it's the 31st of January, so technically if I upload this before the end of the night, I will have uploaded a first episode in the first month of the year, which sets a pretty good precedent. You probably all know me by now. That's pretty good going for me. I've had a really atrocious day, actually. Not for any reason. I just woke up feeling absolutely rubbish. Do you know what? Do you ever have those days where you wake up and you feel rubbish? Now, usually my tactic for such things would be to gorge myself on McDonald's or ice cream or something like that. But this time, no, I've done the opposite. I have just eaten really healthy, been very productive, signed up at the gym, and I'm going to do this podcast episode, being productive again, and I'm going to moisturise my skin, and I'm going to read before bed. I've just got into Discworld, by the way. So one thing to know about me, my dad is a huge Discworld fan. So I basically grew up kind of hearing all about the Discworld characters and universe and all of that. But I've only really recently started reading the books. So for some reason I started with Weird Sisters, and then I read Monstrous Regiment, and then I went back to Colour of Magic and The Light Fantastic, and now I am on Equal Rights, which when I finish that I will of course then move on to Mort. So I'm very, very excited. So any Discworld fans, I'm sure there's a few Discworld fans that listen to this podcast. I feel like there's probably a bit of an overlap. Anyway, just a quick announcement, and then I'm going to launch straight into our Manx episode today. I have a radio play coming out soon. So you must remember that I spoke about this ages ago, and it just never aired. But now it's finally airing on the 10th of February. At 6:30, 11:30 and 4:30. My Tregoint Community Radio will be airing on BBC Radio 4 Extra. I'm sure you can probably listen to that on BBC Sounds. I'm not exactly sure how it all works. But yeah, that's a little 8-minute little radio play that I did with some amazing Cornish actors and actors based in Cornwall and lots of Cornish talent. And basically it's Alan Partridge with Piskies. So it's a community radio programme set in a universe where Piskies, mermaids and giants all exist. So yeah, that sounds like your cup of tea, which, I mean, let's be fair, it's 100% your cup of tea if you're listening to this podcast. Then please, if you are able to give that a listen, I'd really appreciate it. It's really exciting for me. I'm also going to be on TV at some point this year, again talking about Piskies. So I'm hoping that this will be my year. Like I said, I woke up feeling atrocious today, but I've been very on it in January already. I've lost a stone. I'm being very healthy, trying to be an all-rounded healthy human being. So without further ado, let's crack on into the episode. Anyway, how are you all, my friends? It's been a little while, isn't it? November. That's not actually that bad for me. I feel like, that's 3 months? And in my defence, I did also have an eye operation in that time, and it's healed very well. Thank you for asking. Okay, what are we going to talk about today then? We're back on the Isle of Man. What should we talk about today? So I've recently discovered and been reading about and also reading the works of Arthur William Moore, who was a Manx antiquarian, historian, folklorist, sportsman, politician, linguist, definitely linguist. He, in fact, founded the Manx Language Society and became its first president. So a really important, very busy guy, actually, and really, really key in kind of furthering the study and preservation of the Manx language, as well as writing lots of books and things on Manx cultural traditions and history and folklore. So I've particularly been looking at one source, which is the folklore of the Isle of Man, which is very nicely titled for me. I like it simple. I'm a simple girl. The folklore of the Isle of Man, the one I've been looking at, is dated to 1891, and it has quite a few different kind of creatures and subsets of Manx folklore. So it's got like fairies, and it's got hobgoblins, and it's got witchcraft, and then it's got like customs and superstitions. So there's really lots of fun, cool stuff in there. I thought though that I've talked about mermaids and I've talked about fairies and that sort of creature and stuff like that before, but we haven't really talked a lot about like magic and witchcraft, and I thought that might be a fun thing to do as well. I definitely want to do a big episode on Cornish witchcraft, but I feel like that's going to require a lot of research, and there's a lot of people, academics, and a lot of other people who have, that's their field of research and expertise and study. So I might need to touch base with them, and who knows. But for now, I thought that we would look at magic and witchcraft, which is chapter 5 of the folklore of the Isle of Man. Okay. So we're going to be looking at magic and witchcraft in the Isle of Man. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to start by reading the beginning of this chapter. So it would seem that the inhabitants of Man, love that it's just called Man here. Any Manx people out there? Can any of my Manx buddies let me know, like, do you just call it Man sometimes? Because I love that. It would seem that the inhabitants of Man and the other Western Isles of Scotland had acquired a reputation for magical powers at an early period. That huff behind me was Bailey. Don't know if you could hear that. The dog. We call it, when he lies down, like, so for those of you, obviously, you won't know, I'm also doing a TikTok live, so some things I say might not make sense for the podcast medium, but yeah, you imagine me just lying down with, no, don't imagine that, that's a bit naughty, but basically, you can probably imagine what position my dog's in when we call it Bailey Balls and All. He's doing a Bailey Balls and All right now, so if you hear a huff in the background, it's just my Bailey Balls and All, bearing all, doing whatever. Now, anyway, let's continue. For the bard who accompanied Hakon, King of Norway, is it Hakon? Probably should be Hakon, in his expedition to these parts in 1203, wrote as follows: Now our deep inquiring sovereign encountered the horrid powers of enchantment and the abominations of an impious race. The troubled flood tore many fair galleys from their moorings and swept them anchor lest before the waves. A magic-raised watery tempest blew upon our warriors, ambitious of conquest, and against the floating habitations of the brave. Oh, I like that. So those of you who are not aware, I just got into shanty singing. So I have been, the whole of last year getting into singing shanties, and now me and a few of my friends have sort of gone our own way, and we're starting our own shanty group. So anything about crazy, watery graves and spooky island folklore very much appeals to me right now. Hello to everyone who is listening, and hello to everyone who is watching this on my TikTok live. So, what can we learn about witchcraft and all that sort of spooky stuff when it comes to Isle of Man that makes it, different from other places? I'll edit out some of the breaths and pauses and stuff after a while. Okay. One of the reasons I really wanted to look at witchcraft and that kind of thing is that there seems to be loads of different terms in the Isle of Man. So there's practitioners called charmers or witch doctors. And then there's, and please, any of my Manx friends, please correct me on my mispronunciation, because I tend to mispronounce things often. So we've got charmers or fair obby, and then men charmers or ben obby. which are women charmers. So I love this because it kind of talks about how with a lot of witchcraft and a lot of the sort of cunning folk that you find in Cornwall and Scotland and Wales as well, and Ireland, is people that sort of could help cure diseases and boils and all sorts of like physical afflictions. But of course there was also a trade for like spiritual healing, I guess. So like counteracting the spells of like evil witches, and in this case it makes a point of saying counteracting the spells of fairies as well as those of the malevolent sorcerers or witches. So yeah, I just love the idea of there being like all of these different kind of subsets of charmers and witches just kind of doing their own thing. I'm probably gonna go off on one on this episode, and I don't know how historically accurate I'm being, really. I'm very much kind of deep into the disc world at the moment, so who knows what I'm even chatting about. Like I said, I've just started Equal Rights and I've just finished Light Fantastic, and the first Discworld book I properly read was Weird Sisters, so I feel like the witches, the Discworld witches and magic practitioners and wizards are like at the forefront of my brain. So if I start like not making much sense or sounding actually all that historical, I am using this source. I am using a historical 19th century source, but still, I feel like I might be channeling some Discworld as well. Okay, the fun thing about this is that there seems to be this like proper archetypal witch described, like using imps and familiars and casting an evil eye against her enemies, and riding on a broomstick and all of this like brilliant stuff. So I wonder where like the first written kind of sources for this stuff is like the broomstick and the imps and the familiars and all that kind of stuff. But we've got this idea of like the evil witches and wizards who are like going around diseasing people's cattle and stuff, and then you've got the sort of the witch doctors and the charmers and the men charmers and the women charmers who are like trying to counteract these witch spells. So it feels like very fantasy to me. This feels like, you know, keep harking back to it, but it feels very Discworld, very fantasy to me. I don't know, maybe I'm sort of downplaying. It must have been a pretty scary time though, when you could genuinely believe that there were people out there that were like full on diseasing your cattle. Though I say that I am convinced that I have been cursed. Like, not right now, but I feel like there was a point in my last year, right, where like so many things were going wrong for me. November 2021, I'll tell you right now, November 2021, I won't say exactly what happened then, but something happened around that time, and I feel like I was cursed by someone, and I know who I think did it, but, you know, I'm probably just talking out my ass. But yeah, loads of weird things went wrong for me in November 2021. So who knows? Maybe there are people still out there cursing each other. Don't curse me. Can't really handle it. Oh, I'm also recording on TikTok Live, by the way. So yes, thank you very much to anyone that is sending me gifts and being nice on there. People are trying to join me on live, but I don't want any of that. So kind of picture this, you know, you're walking on like the misty, are there moors in the Isle of Man? I really want to visit, actually. I really, really, really want to visit Isle of Man. So I'm just imagining like some misty landscape and some like archetypal fantasy witch kind of cackling and riding on her broomstick, and then some charmer like trying to send her back. It's brilliant. Loving it. Having a lot of fun. So witches seem to be kind of evil in this idea. This is a very much looking at things through a sort of Christian lens, actually, which of course does make a lot of sense. This was a book written in 1891, so I'm assuming would have been firmly Christian. So talking about things like witchcraft and stuff like that, it's always seen through this sort of, yeah, this kind of scared, not quite sure what's going on lens. Whereas I'm not always sure if that was the case in Wales and Cornwall. It feels like cunning folk, like cunning men and cunning women. Obviously, a lot of their trade was, as is described here, like was charms and things to protect against evil witches, but it doesn't always necessarily feel like they were always evil. I am very tired, so I'm probably talking a lot of shit. Excuse me. No! I'm going to have to edit that out. I don't swear on my podcast. But it's not all evil, right? So a particularly powerful witch doctor was said to be Tir of Balawain, who was described as, and I've just kind of been absolutely obsessed with this phrasing, the seer is a little man far advanced into the veil of life. I am just obsessed with that. I feel like I need to just include that on all of my social media bios at the moment. Far advanced into the veil of life. Beautiful way of just saying that he was, pretty damn old. And what the really particularly interesting thing about this is, so it says that this witch doctor, was very powerful in terms of his being able to kind of counteract bad spells and that sort of thing, and curing illnesses and that kind of thing. And if people have used other practitioners and they haven't worked, then they would move on to this guy. So he was said to be like really, really powerful. But the really interesting thing that I came across was that it said his powers were supposed to be hereditary, and they were handed down throughout his family, generation by generation. But the thing that I've come across that I haven't really ever found in any other sort of myths and legends is that apparently the powers were handed down from man to a woman, and then in the next generation from a woman to a man, and so on and so forth. So kind of going from man to woman to man to woman. I feel like there could be a really, really great story there. So those of you who have been listening to my podcast for a while will know that a really big passion of mine, obviously I love folklore for the storytelling, and I love folklore for the stories and the morals that you can find within. And I also love it as a kind of underrated historical tool to understand the people of the past. But I particularly love folklore, especially if you're going to use folklore now to talk about the modern world and issues that are maybe a little bit sometimes difficult to broach. So I feel like there's a particularly good story in that. So hopefully that might inspire some people to write some really cool stories about Manx witch doctors and their daughters and then their sons and all that sort of thing. So yeah, I find it really cool. And again, gonna plug my little radio play again. I know I did it at the beginning, but so what I've done is with Tregoint Community Radio, which again, like I said, airs on the 10th of February at 6:30, 11:30 and 4:30 on BBC Radio 4 Extra. I've used Cornish folklore to talk about the present day Cornwall. So I've used like piskies not being able to afford their stone circles anymore because like very posh fairies from up country are coming down and buying second stones. So it's very on the nose. It's very, very, very on the nose. But I'm using like the current state of affairs in Cornwall. I'm using folklore to talk about those things in a way that's funny and broaches the topics in a sort of fun and accessible way, but also hopefully I am getting my point across. So I feel like you could do the same with a mad witch doctor from the Isle of Man and his offspring. So food for thought for you writers out there who are much more clever than me and will bring your stories to fruition. But I found that really, really cool. I've not come across that before, the whole changing from man to woman, passing down the powers through the generations. So yeah, I thought I'd definitely include that. Okay, that experiment is over. I had to stop the TikTok live because my brain can only handle so many things at once, and I couldn't handle talking to you guys and also talking to TikTok at the same time. That was too much. I'm very sorry. If you've listened to me for a while, you know that there is a fair degree of experimentation with this podcast, so it kind of comes with the territory at this point. I feel like if you take anything from this episode, please take far advanced into the veil of life. Oh, I've just woke up with a new pain. Guess I'm getting, far advanced into the veil of life. Or do you know what? These biscuits taste a bit, stale and far advanced into the veil of life. I really love me a bit of, far advanced into the veil of life, school punk. I just really hope that you carry that, into your lives, that verbiage. Please and thank you. This chapter itself is quite interesting because it gives a kind of rundown of a lot of the sources that Moore has read himself. And he's quite sympathetic, actually, to a lot of people that have been accused of witchcraft, probably quite unfairly so. But there's also mentions of different charms and things. So someone was said to have burnt down their petticoat and then drank it to better their health, and someone else burnt some kind of earth ashes and threw it on their farm to try and ensure their cows are producing better milk. So it's a lot of different interesting things that I haven't really come across before. I mean, I've come across people wanting to do that kind of thing before, aiding their health, producing better milk and better yields on their farm. But yeah, just some of the charms are a little bit different than what I've read in other books. I'm really tired today, so I don't know how good this episode's going to be. Probably not any good, but I'm hoping it will help me kickstart doing one every month for this year. We can dream, we can dream. Also, to my Irish friends out there, I kind of hate to say that a lot of these supposed witches are just people hanging out with Irish women. It just seems to crop up again and again that women that are friends with Manx women that are friends with Irish women get accused of witchcraft, which does not seem very nice to me. I am reading this on sacred-texts.com, which is an excellent resource. And I've mentioned it before. It has a lot of stuff pertaining to Celtic. So definitely give the chapter itself a read. Before I go, there's a particularly interesting little excerpt that I will kind of summarise. And that is about the Magician's Palace. So this seems to be a bit more of a standard folk tale. And of course, we've got to include those, don't we? I just love the opening line. In the days of enchantment, a certain great magician had, by his art, raised for himself the most magnificent palace in the Isle of Man that I ever beheld. But none who, either out of curiosity or a desire of being entertained there, went to it, but was immediately converted into stone, or at least had the appearance of it. So implacable an enemy was the wicked master of it, all his own species, being served only by infernal spirits. Yes, that was all one sentence. But suffice to say, I just like that, in the days of enchantment. Now, this enchanter creates this magical mansion. Think of the most luxurious, grand abode that you can imagine out in the country. Think of piazzas, of porticos, of walled gardens, something very magnificent. And yet no one in the neighbouring villages would go anywhere near this palace, for people were turned to stone, people were cursed. In fact, it was so bad that almost the whole half of that island was left where the necromancer was doing his dark deeds and what else. Now, one day there was a pilgrim who, bless his heart, knew absolutely nothing about this great enchanter. Now, this pilgrim, he was cold, he was hungry, he was scared, and he was walking and the sun was beginning to fade. All he could see was the black mountains in front of him, and he thought, goodness me, I need shelter. I can't last out here in the cold, under the great sky, in these mountains alone. And what should he come across but a great big mansion? Beautiful house, one of the most beautiful houses he had ever seen. He thanks God. And Without wanting to disturb the master of the house, he simply lays down on the garden, on the marble floor, and he's quite hungry, so he takes out of his pocket a little bit of meat, and he has a little bit of salt on him. And as he's putting the salt on the meat, we like someone that seasons their food. I guess salt counts as a seasoning, at least it's something. As he's putting the salt on the meat, some of it drops onto the floor. And what should happen but the great big mirage in front of him, the house, the garden, all twist and coil in horrible, unearthly shapes until whoosh, they disappear into thin air. This poor man, absolutely troubled at what's just happened, kind of again gets down on his knees, prays to God, and stays that way all night, thanking God that he has protected him through the night and kept him safe. Now, this poor man, when the sun begins to appear the next day, walks to the nearest villagers and tells the lets all of the village know. And at first they do not believe him. They have heard tales of this dark necromancer. They know that he is not to be trifled with. Who is this stranger, this pilgrim, this walker, to tell us that he has defeated this man? But they go in their groups to the land where the necromancer lived. And what should be there but nothing, no house. And from that moment, salt was considered of the utmost importance. No great life events were experienced without the sharing of salt. Yeah, I love that. I very much embellished that. That's not how it's written. I completely just, read it and then embellished it myself. So I hope you enjoyed that little mini folktale then. But what really fascinated me about that was the salt. And many of you who have listened to my earlier podcasts, especially the Cornish ones with piskies, will know that piskies don't like salt. So it's interesting to me to find that kind of commonality in Manx folklore with this supposed necromancer and dark magic not liking the touch of salt. There's something about that. I wonder what it is about creatures of the other world, if that's what you want to imagine they are, not liking salt. So much like in the same way I've sort of jokingly told people a folklore survival tip, if you're ever traversing around the deepest, darkest Cornish moors, is to carry a bit of salt in your pocket. Apparently, after this whole necromancer enchanter saga, it was, something that you should do is to carry a bit of salt in your pocket. So you were never sort of left unawares if ever you were coming across something strange or bizarre. You always had a bit of salt to add to the equation to keep you that little degree safer. So burning things tends to be quite magical, apparently, and salt seems to counteract magic. So there you go. If you've ever learned anything from this podcast episode, carry salt. Probably don't hang out with Irish women because you'll get accused of witchcraft. Sorry, I'm only joking there. And also, I really implore you all to say far advanced into the veil of time instead of old. In fact, you're not allowed to say old anymore. You all have to go out into this world and say far advanced into the veil of time. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for listening to this episode. Sorry, I've been very tired. Like I said, I woke up this morning feeling rubbish. I think I feel slightly better now. Hopefully, you've at least got some enjoyment from this episode. It's always lovely talking to you. Hopefully, it's always nice listening to me. Who knows? Thank you so much for your patience. And I promise you there will be another episode in February. I am going to try and keep to my promise of being a more well-rounded human being, looking after myself mentally, physically, spiritually, and part of that is dedicating more time in the evenings to reading and research and actually getting these episodes out there, sharing these stories. And I know I make it sound like a chore. It's not. I love sharing these stories with you. It's one of my biggest passions. I've just not been very good at time management, but I'm getting much better. I'm finding I'm very busy, and the busier I am, the more time I actually seem to have. I don't know how that works, but the busier I am, the better I seem to be able to juggle and handle everything. And I've been able to kind of carve out some more time for myself for the podcast. So Yes, I promise you there will be another one in February, and I really hope that there will be an episode every month for the year of 2023. Please listen to my little radio play when that comes out. Please keep an eye on the TV for when my folklore Pisky appearance comes out. I'll let you know more details when I have them, but it's going to be a certain someone is doing I can probably tell you. I don't know if I can tell you or not, but anyway, there's going to be a new TV series on British myths and legends. Look out for it, and I might be in it. Okay, see you guys soon. Well, I guess I won't see you. I don't have the power of magic to look through my microphone and see all your lovely, wonderful faces. But speak to you next time. Thanks, guys. Bye.